Hey, look out. It's Faith Talk Live. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
Dan, I am so excited. I'm just a hair nervous. This guy, a legend.
Yes,
And
he is.
38 years ago, I started listening to CCM music and had a few of his albums and maybe a cassette or two. Christian.
Maybe an 8-track?
Yes, my wife did. She certainly did. Chris Christian, singer, songwriter, producer, author. It continues on. Chris, how are you?
Hey, Rick and Dan. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Now, listen to this, Dan. I wrote this down so I could remember it. Some of his songs have been recorded by legends themselves: Elvis, Olivia Newton-John, Hall & Oates, America, Amy Grant, the Imperials. We could be here all day, but we won't. Amazing. What, 4 Doves? Was it 4? And 4 Grammys?
Wow. Well, produced 4 albums, 1 Grammy, yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. It's so good to talk to you. Now, I got to ask this. Now, before we went on, since you're a Texan, you and Dan were talking Texas talk, and I was totally alienated. But I want to know.
I'll get my guns up. You get your horns up.
Oh, my God. Look out. All right. So, Chris, whom is on your Spotify playlist? Who are you listening to?
You know, I don't listen to music on the radio or the Spotify or Pandora. I listen to news because my has been about creating music. And I was in the studio, as David Foster calls it, the submarine. I was in the submarine for about 35 years, looking for every little hair of what kick drum didn't right with the bass or what guitar lick is a little bit late. And I just have a hard time listening to music without dissecting it and try to figure out where the problems are. And so, unfortunately, I just can't sit down and listen to music, enjoy it. When I listened to music back when I was making it a lot for 35 years, I was looking for an idea. What's some new guitar lick or what's some new sound slapback on the, I was always studying. So music to me is something to study, but I love music. I mean, I love music, but I just don't sit down and listen, general music lists.
Now, there is a song that I've been singing I haven't heard it in years, but it's in my soul, I guess. I'll be walking around and it's a Chris Christian song. Don't give up, don't give it all to him. And I just out of the blue, I'll be doing dishes in the kitchen or something or talking to the kids and it comes out. You had this gift, just intuitive, wasn't it? To write those hooks and then put a nice solid message on the inside of it. Is that something? How did you get that? Were you born with that?
I was born with a music love and talent. In fact, I wrote a book I think we'll talk about later. I was looking through my grandmother and my mother's notes to each other about me when I was young. And my mother wrote my grandmother and said, well, we've been playing, we played trucks with Chris for about maybe 20 seconds. We got the fire truck out for about 20 seconds. For the last hour and a half, we've been beating the pans and playing music. Well, I looked at the date, and the date would have put me at 1.5 years old.
Wow.
So at 1.5 years old, I didn't want fire trucks. I didn't want, those kind of things. But once they got into playing some music and beating the pom-poms or whatever, then, and I remember going in elementary school real early on, 2nd or 3rd grade, we went to the symphony. My mother took me. We were on the front row. To this day, I don't know how I did it, but I looked up at my mother and I said, that second string player is out of tune.
Wow.
And so it was just something I had. And then in the 4th grade, I went to Crockett Elementary and had a son that had a song on Abilene. His name was Dal Patterson. And I thought it was just a big hit because, he's a local guy getting a local airplay, but I thought it was a worldwide hit. So I asked her if he would come play in our class. How cool is that? Your teacher has a star, as a son. So he comes to our 4th grade class and he looked like Elvis, a good looking guy. And he long dark hair, and he played the song. And halfway through that song, in the 4th grade, I just said, that's what I want to do. And so it wasn't shortly after I wrote The Clouds Are High in the Sky, a little 4-note thing. And I never thought of it as an occupation. It's just something that I love to do. And then when I went to Nashville, now I'll wrap it up. As my wife says, land the plane. When I went to Nashville, I just went to Nashville with $100, just wanted to make music. Not country, not pop, not Christian. There wasn't any Christian music. There was gospel. Right. And I grew up in Church of Christ where we didn't even have music in the church. I mean, instruments in the church, it was all a cappella. So I was always imagining strings and bass lines. I had to because it was all a cappella. Well, when Elvis cut one of my songs, the first song I ever wrote, which is a whole nother story, but that was the first song. And then all of a sudden I got noticed in Nashville. Then Olivia Newton-John called, and they came and I worked on her first album in the United States. And then I saw this group named Dogwood at Koinonia, which was a coffee house on Music Row. And I thought they were good. So I called Pat Boone, who I'd known, and I said, hey, Pat, this group's really good. Could I make a record? And he was starting a new label called Lamb and Lion. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, how much do you need? And I said, I don't know. I've never made a record. I said, how about 5,000? So Pat said, okay. So he sent me 5,000, did the Dogwood album. And here's where it all started. Heard the Dogwood album. They had just signed B.J. Thomas to do his first Christian album. And whoever did that Dogwood album needs to do B.J. Thomas. So the second album that I ever produced was B.J. Thomas, and that was an album called Home Where I Belong.
Yeah.
And that album went gold, and now I hear it's platinum. And of course, those are in the days that the Imperials were selling 15,000 records. You know, they were the big gospel group. And so here comes PJ, and Stan said, we don't know what you're doing up there. We don't know what kind of music that is, but do it. We're going to pay for 5 years, for 5 albums, for 5 years. Just find some more of it.
Wow.
So a little girl that went to church, 16-year-old girl at church named Amy Grant, she had a few songs. So I asked her if she wanted to do a record, and the rest is history.
Yeah. That's incredible. Well, I wish we could sit here and talk about it forever, but we got to get the highlights here. And we were talking before we started, and you were talking about being in Hollywood and going to church.
Yeah.
And there was a story about being there with Robert Kardashian and Jeff Bridges. Tell us that story.
Well, Robert was my best friend. He was the first guy I met when I came to LA. He got me my record deal on Boardwalk Records with Neil Bogart. He got me on American Bandstand. He got Bob Gaudio, who's the Four Seasons Jersey boy, and he got him to produce the record. And we had a very successful album called Chris Christian, but the single was I Want You, I Need You. And Cheryl Abb was on that. And it was Christopher Cross was on the album, Frankie Valli. It was a great album. But anyway, so Robert and I were just the whole Kardashians in our family were just family friends. So Robert and I were at church one day, and Ken Gullickson was the pastor, and he was teaching on the passage where it says it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a wealthy man to go to heaven. And that was his talk. Mm-hmm. And so he looked around and said, look around. Everybody, there was about 2,000 people at the service. He said, there's BMWs, Rolls Royces, Range Rovers out in the parking lot. All of y'all are wealthy. He said, very few of y'all are going to hear the trumpet of the Lord when the Lord comes. Well, Robert was on my right. I was in the middle. And then Jeff Bridges had just come down and the actor was just sat next to me. And so in about seconds, very few of you are going to hear the trumpet of the Lord when the Lord comes. Robert leans over to Jeff and I, and he goes, did you guys hear that trumpet?
Oh my gosh. That's
wow. Funny. Great story. Singer, songwriter, author, Chris Christian on YouTube, Facebook Live, and on the radio. Chris, we'll just take a reset here, and we do want to get into your new book. Chris Christian, you can find out more about Chris on his website. That's chrischristianmusic.com, or a music legend. And we could talk all day about his music, but I really want to talk too about his brand new book. Something you said previously, Chris, your grandmother and your mother shared notes about you. I would think those notes, I I rarely hear that, if ever, that happens, but those have to be gold to you, right?
Well, obviously to me they're gold because they're I can't remember back when I was 1.5, but I get to see what I was like and my grandmother, the reason my book is called A Grandmother's Prayer is that every time we prayed, she would pray, let little Chris go into the world and preach the gospel. And
Wow.
I think in her mind, every time it was like maybe go to Amarillo and teach Sunday school, or that's probably what she was thinking. But my love for music kind of came along beside that. And when I went to Nashville, not to do Christian or gospel music, I just went to do music, country, pop, whatever was available, jingles. And then the way God answered, I think my grandmother's prayer was that I did Dogwood, and then B.J. Thomas, and then signed Amy Grant, and then another 100 and some odd albums that I produced. This music has gone into the world to preach the gospel, with literally gone into every corner of the world. So wow. I think my life, everything is an answer to my grandmother's prayer.
All right, Chris, the book that's out, tell us about the book, how that came about. It kind of tells your story, how you got into music and kind of the history and how you got hooked up with all these incredible people that you've worked with. Tell us about how the book all came about.
Well, many years ago, I had this thought, and I came up with this slogan that I trademarked a long time ago. If it isn't on video, it didn't happen.
Yep.
Because I think when people look for history of something now, they don't go read a bunch of books and volumes. They go look on YouTube or Netflix or a documentary or whatever. And so I said, I had been blessed with such an incredible life, and I met such incredible people and learned so many things, not just music people, but chairman of PepsiCo and the chairman of this and that, and partners with incredible people. Met Howard Hughes. I mean, so I just had some incredible events. So I wanted to put this in a video, and it just kind of worked out that as I was writing out, getting ready to see what the story would be in the video or the movie, it became a book. And that's probably the best thing anyway, because then I had to really go back to Olivia and back to everybody. And when I talked to Olivia about her story in the book, her part, she told me something that I'd totally forgotten. She said, you remember that time we were back on your back porch? And what I remember a lot, other than having fun in the studio, making music of Don't Stop Believing, I remember sitting there and watching all these blinking little bugs flying around. I've never seen fireflies before.
Wow.
And so that's a cute little moment that was a first for Olivia. And so anyway, and I talked to Chris Kardashian. She told me, hey, you remember when I went and got those leather pants for American Bandstand when you did that? You dressed terrible, and I got your gray boots. And I forgot that. So I think the book was good because it brought a lot of memories back from other people when I talked to them. And I hope that it does get into a video component, documentary, movie, whatever it is, because there's some really funny stories. There's some really lessons learned that I think would help anybody. And there's a bunch of Elvis stories too. I mean, meeting Elvis at the top of the Sands and working for Wayne Newton at the top of the hill, playing guitar for Chet Atkins. One time we're at a Humana golf tournament, and there's Chet Atkins, Roy Clark, Jerry Reed, John Hartford, and me. I mean, the stories of those events, I just wanted people to enjoy some of the memories that I've got, and hopefully some of them are interesting to other people.
Love
it. And let me say one more thing. And I think the real purpose of the book and the underlying thread is that pray for your grandchildren. Pray for your grandchildren, because God answers prayers. He sure answered my grandmother's prayer. And I think that it'll change their life for sure, and it might even change the world.
Yeah.
Chris Christian, we're talking about his brand new book. It's called A Grandmother's Prayer, Moments in a Music Life. Your grandmother, did she say, yeah, the prayer that I prayed, I see it now? You just mentioned, you described the gospel going around the world with so many artists. Was she able to see any of that? And what did she say if she did?
I had with Cotton Lloyd and Christian, I had a couple of pop hits. We had not done the Christian. Amy, she passed away before all that happened. But she kept writing. When Elvis said he was going to record one of my songs, I wrote her and told her, and she said, well, you need to stay in school. I mean, these opportunities will come along again. I've got that in the book.
That's funny.
Yeah, you can get Chris's book. I'm sure you can get it on Amazon. You can get it on his website as well, chrischristianmusic.com. Chris, let's talk. We've got a few minutes. Let's talk a little bit about the Huckabee Show. You've already taped it. Tell us about it. It's coming up. What is it? Are you going to play with him? I know he's a bass player, right? I think he's a bass player.
Well, I'd enjoy if I am going to play. Actually, I did the show a couple months ago. We talked about George Harrison and other people and Amy. Mm-hmm. But this time we're going to tape it on the 11th, and I think it's aired December 19th. It's a Christmas show. And so a group called the Archers, I produced Steve Archer, a lot of hits. They're going to come up, and we're going to do a song on my Christmas album, because we're re-releasing my Christmas album with some new cuts on it. And we're going to sing a song, God Bless the Children, which BJ did and is on this album. So we're going to tape it on the 11th, but I hear it's going to be aired on December 19th.
That'll be fun. So look for that, the Mike Huckabee Show in December. And I want to talk a little bit about as well, you're involved in sports there in Dallas. Not only were you a big, at least people who grew up in Dallas probably knew of your work with the Dallas Cowboys and making an album or two with them. And you're also involved with the WNBA there. Talk about how that all came about.
Well, my daughter was a great basketball player, one of the best in the nation. And she played in a game that got a lot of press. They won 100-0. And it went all over ESPN. They had Outside the Lines flew down and interviewed the coach, all that stuff. Anyway, so I followed women's basketball. When she quit, my wife and I loved the women's game. And so I met a guy that was bringing a team down from Tulsa, from Detroit to Tulsa, a WNBA team. And we met, and he said, hey, I wanted to have a Dallas team, but they weren't ready to expand. So he said, why don't you get involved in Tulsa, and then whenever you have your Dallas opportunity, you'll already have some experience. And I thought that made sense. So about 13 years ago, I bought into Tulsa Shock. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, Bill Cameron's his name, and he decided, hey, let's move the Tulsa Shock down to Dallas. And that's how the Tulsa Shock became the Dallas Wings.
Awesome.
Wow. Very cool. Talking to Chris Christian, we're talking about his book, about his music, and about his involvement with sports. Dan had mentioned, you guys were talking earlier, because I didn't live in Dallas. I didn't know all this, but you had cut a couple of albums with. Now these guys are legends, the Dallas Cowboys, the ones Danny White, Roger Staubach, Drew Pearson. You didn't mention
Tony Dorsett, Herschel Walker.
Tom Landry.
Yeah.
Now, there used to be a video, and you're re-releasing that. Can we talk about that, or is that something you've got to keep under wraps?
No. Well, it's been out for 35 years, the individual videos. We put out the project in 85 and 86. There's about 7 videos. And Danny and I thought, why don't we just put some kind of show together that kind of makes a Christmas, show out of all these great videos, because Danny's very proud of it. I'm proud of it. And, when Tony Dorsett was on interviewing him, it's hilarious. I said, Tony, what'd you think about your singing there? You sound pretty good to me. He said, wow, I was fantastic. I got to take my hat off to me.
Sounds like Tony D.
Yeah, we just had a great time reliving that great time of doing that music and videos. And of course, some of the people like Tom Landry and Bob Hayes are no longer with us. So
yeah,
it's especially special in that way.
How can folks find that? Where will that be?
Not real sure. But hopefully it'll be easy to find. We're just in the middle of putting that together.
Awesome.
Once we find out, we'll tell everybody. Chris Christian, chrischristianmusic.com, the place to go to also pick up A Grandmother's Prayer, Moments in a Music Life. We got to go to a break here in a second, Chris. I got to ask you this. You've been writing for so long, producing. Are you always still kind of jotting things down on a napkin or a receipt, or have you put that to bed?
Well, I think of song ideas every once in a while, and I write them down, and I maybe write them. But I have such a body of work. I mean, 113. It's really trying to find out how should I repurpose those, or how should they be redone, or maybe who should else record, or what movie should one of these songs be in, or just like the cowboy thing, something we did 35 years ago. Now we're coming up with some way to, put it together and let the world see, Roger Staubach and Tony Dorsett and what they look like now, and talking about the good old days.
Yeah.
So it's taking what I've done and really trying to repackage it in some ways.
Awesome.
Well, we're so just moved and blessed that your grandmother prayed that, and look out, we're all gleaning from that prayer, all that fruit, and we want people to follow you and also read the book about your grandmother, your music career, and more. And it's not over yet. ChrisChristianMusic.com, the place to go to. Chris, it has been such a treat to hang with you. Would love to get with you again sometime. You and Dan are allowed to talk Dallas stuff if we can get you on the show.
Well, let me tell you, I also love to talk Chick-fil-A stuff, because I did one of the first jingles for Chick-fil-A.
Oh, wow.
When Dan Cathy was probably 8 or something like that. So I visited him when my daughter played basketball there, and I think Bubba and Dan, I just love the Truitt family, and
good people.
Highly of them.
Yeah. Chris Christian, check out his stuff. You can hear it on Spotify, no doubt. Check out his website, ChrisChristianMusic.com. We got to take a break. We'll be back. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
This is Faith Talk Live.